Hi everybody, welcome to another fabulous LoveBiz workshop. So today we're really lucky to have one of our capital members actually. So allow me to introduce Fahimah for you. So Fahimah established her company in 2019, so No7 Legal Services Limited. And Fahimah is a commercial contracts lawyer with over 10 years of experience. She was called to the bar in 2008, and Fahimah has worked with a broad spectrum of clients from small startup businesses to large multinationals on a wide variety of contractual matters. So Fahimah will be sharing her expertise with her workshop, Do Business on Your Own Terms. So just give us a quick show of hands. How many of us have got T's and C's within their business? Yeah. And how often do you visit them? Please unmute for this, Sojan, if you'd like to. How often do you visit them?
Never.
Never. Thank you, Sarah. I'm kind of with you on that. Guilty.
Mine are quite recent because
Okay.
I was a virtual assistant from 2004 till about 18 months ago. I'm now a bookkeeper, but I still do some VA stuff. But because, you know, in terms of what I have to say to my clients, they're quite different. So I have had to revisit them quite recently.
Excellent. Brilliant. Nicola?
Usually about every 12 months, but when we get a new client or the terms and conditions change with an existing client, that just gives an opportunity to sort of review the package then really. So I'd say quite often, to be fair.
That sounds really
brilliant. Thank you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mute myself. So Fahimah has kindly offered to answer any questions in the Q&A after her talk. So please, anything that comes up while she's talking, please make a note. And we will come back to Fahimah. So Fahimah, over to you. Thank you. And I'm going to share your screen now.
Thank you, Pyle. Okay, so today's presentation is called Do Business on Your Terms. And that's something that I'm just really about in life and business, is we should do everything on our own terms where possible. And even as a small business, it is possible for you to run your business on your terms, or as close as possible to what it is you'd like to do and the way you'd like to do it. So Pyle, next slide, please. So this is what we're going to cover on today's workshop. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, and then we're going to go into what is a business contract. Don't worry, it won't be a law lecture. We're not going to go into all of the details, but just so you know, what is a contract? Like, what's the point in a contract? And then the next thing is, as a business owner, which contracts and policies should you be aware of? And we'll talk a little bit about those. And then what contracts do you personally need in your business and why? And what are your options for getting contracts in place, and what does it cost? Common mistakes and small businesses make is something we'll cover as well, because it's, you know, if you know about mistakes, then you can stop doing them, or you can prevent from ever having to make them in the first place. We can all learn from each other. Importance of seeking legal advice. I'll talk you through about why you really should seek legal advice when it comes to contracts. And then next steps and top tips. Okay, next slide, please, Pyle. Okay, a little bit about me. So Pyle's already introduced me, so I'm going to run through this one nice and quickly. Like she said, I was called to the bar in 2008. I am a specialist in contract law, and the years just keep growing every year, don't they? I'm 12 years in now. Still sounds weird to me, but yes, I've been doing solely contract law for 12 years. I've done law for 15 years. So yeah, it's pretty much what I've been doing for a very long time. It's non-traditional legal practice, and this, I just want to explain a little bit. So the Solicitors Regulation Authority classifies contract law as unreserved activity. And what that means is I, as a legal practice, have a lot of freedom around how I practice. So my client journey is very much up to me. And in certain other areas of law, like, you know, when you're buying or selling a house, it's much more prescriptive about how they have to manage clients and what the journey should look like. But in contracts, I have a lot of freedom with how I run my business. And so I've spent a lot of time thinking about what works for you as a client as well. And so that's things like fixed fees rather than hourly rates. I give you a quote with a fixed fee. And also I try and cut out the legal jargon and just make it much more accessible to everyone and just have a chat. And then I take care of the legal jargon side and I explain stuff to you guys, just because why have all of that when you don't need it? So that's just a little bit about why it's a non-traditional practice. A little bit just about me, my hobbies, the things I love. I love traveling. Who doesn't? Yeah, that just kind of includes normal holidays and everything. So yeah, it's a lovely sunny day out today. Oh gosh, there's a bird sign. And then I love things like calisthenics. If you don't know what that is, it's just like training in the gym, but using your body, doing all the Spider-Man kind of stuff, pull-ups and push-ups and all that kind of stuff. I just love all that. Quality time with my favorite people at the minute. My favorite person is my 1-year-old niece. And I love interviewing people for my podcast. I've got a podcast that's also called On Your Terms. And that's really about living life and doing business on your own terms. And I have really inspiring people on there that I interview. So that's something new that I've really started to enjoy doing. And in general, I like to live life with an open mind and with wonder and curiosity. And that's the way I like to approach things. Thank you, Pyle. Okay, so what is a business contract? Now, a business contract is usually a document. Now, you might have heard that a contract can be verbal as well. It can, but it's always best to have it in writing because then you can prove it. It's there, it's written, it's concrete, and you can use it as a document to prove things. And what do you need to prove? You need to prove what is the nature of the business relationship. Now, a relationship can be, a business relationship can be the relationship between you and your clients or customers, or you and your suppliers, or you and other partners. So it's a document that describes what's the nature of that relationship, including rights and obligations. So if I had a contract with Pyle to work with her on a joint business venture, our contract would include all of Pyle's rights in our relationship, all of my rights in our relationship, all of Pyle's obligations and things she has to do in that relationship, and all of my rights, all of my obligations and things I am duty bound to do as well. So it just maps it all out, makes it really, really clear. And that's what a contract is. Now, if you have a business, you might have a micro business where it's just you and your business. That's what my business is like. It's just me. And if you have a business, you might be thinking, it's so small, do I need contracts or T's and C's? The answer is if you have customers or clients in any way, shape or form, then yes, you do. You need T's and C's or a client contract. And clients and customers would be for goods or services or a combination of both. So if you provide, VA services, for example, you're not selling a tangible thing, but you are selling your services. So you do need T's and C's or a contract. Or if you're selling, pieces of artwork, then that's a tangible thing and you still need some level of T's and C's or a contract. We'll talk a bit more about which ones in a bit. But model agreements, you might have heard of that term. And what it really means, it's quite good, is that you have a contract written up for one particular scenario. So for example, you might have a client contract written up that you're going to use with your clients. That is now called a model agreement, which you will use with all of your clients going forward. As long as you're doing a similar service and you're providing the same sort of thing to different people, you can use the same model agreement. And all you do is you make a few tweaks on it, which are like in highlighted fields, is the way I work. And you just make a few tweaks, put new client's name, address, the generic stuff that needs changing. But usually, as long as you're having the same type of client for the same type of service or goods, it's fine to just use the same contract. And that is then called a model agreement. This is just a quote from myself, which is all legal protections aside. So even if there wasn't, the need to protect yourself legally, a contract or T's and C's make the business relationship with your clients clearer. This helps in a big way to reduce day-to-day issues and misunderstandings. So, when you might have loads of those customer service niggles, or, oh, I thought that was included, how come I didn't receive that? Or, oh, that's not what I was expecting. All those sorts of things, a good contract, a good T's and C's helps to alleviate those as well. Next slide, please, Pyle. So which contracts and policies do you need to be aware of? So this is just a run through of the types of contracts there are in a business context and in the context of being an owner of a small business like most of you are. So you might need a confidentiality agreement. This is also often called a CDA or an NDA. And basically it's an agreement, if it's written well, it's not too long, it's not too daunting for anyone you hand it out to, but you have one of these as a model agreement that you then go ahead and use whenever you're planning on having a meeting with someone new and you're sharing some of your business secrets. So you're giving away something. In that meeting, you're talking about something that is actually one of your business processes, one of your business secrets, something that is you know, an asset to your business that you're sharing. And what it does is it means the other person can't go ahead and share that with other people. It just makes it very clear, I'm sharing this with you under these terms. Don't go ahead and share it with anyone else. Don't go ahead and copy it. So it's just to protect you. And I recommend that all businesses should just have one of these written up so they can go ahead and use it, because the number of times people have gone into these sorts of meetings and then someone's gone ahead and done something without them. So not collaborated in the end, but gone ahead with the idea and just run with it. Or the number of times, you know, someone's gone and copied something in its entirety. It's just really good to have an NDA or CDA in place. They're really cheap to get written up because they're not that bespoke, other than to make sure it covers the way you have meetings with people or the way that your kind of stuff that you do in your business. It's covered nicely, but it's not a lot of work to make that bespoke. And so it's quite a cheap one to get done. Other things you'll need is client or customer T's and C's. Like I said, if you have clients or customers, you need some kind of client contract or T's and C's. Contracts with key suppliers. So if you use suppliers in your business, for example, you might be an interior designer and then you're using, you know, carpenters, you're using carpet fitters, you're using plumbers and all other suppliers for curtains and blinds, whatever it might be. All those suppliers, you'll have contracts with them, or you should have contracts with them to govern the relationship between you and them and the supply situation that you're in. Website terms and policies. So when it comes to websites, there's a whole area of what you need in that. But if you do have a chat with me, I can tell you about what it is you need. But if you have a website, whether or not you're selling from it, you still need some of these terms and some of these policies on there. And that surprises a lot of people, because most people say to me, yes, I've got a website, but I don't really sell on my website. It's just for information. Annoyingly, you're still not protected, because the way the law works is if you put something on your website, someone can rely on it unless you say otherwise. And that's why you have some T's and C's on your website as well. And then there's the usual things like privacy policy and cookie policy and things like that, which are quite easy to get in place as well. Other things you might want to think about is if you're not a micro business and you've got employees, or if you use freelancers, you know, contractors to do bits of your business for you, then you'll need some contracts for those things. Other policy documents. So like I said, there's a few privacy policy, cookie policy type documents. But if you do have staff, you might want to have other things in place as well to do with like maternity leave or other, you know, HR policies and things like that. So I cover those as well. And basically in terms of other contracts, anything that you do in your business where you're creating a relationship with someone else, whether you're collaborating for a short-term project or a long-term project, or you're doing, you know, you're running your business separately, but you're joining someone to create this joint venture, which is a smaller part, should have a contract for that, because that's a new relationship, it's a new service you're providing, and you're doing it with someone else. So, you know, you need to map out what are they doing, what are you doing, and what are you both getting through it. Okay, thank you, Pyle. What contracts do you personally need in your business and why? So you're all here today, you're here spending your time listening to this. So I think it's really important you get something out of it personally. So what is it you need? So I offer a free client call to anyone who wants to work out what do they need in their business. And that's a picture of me with my notebook that I use when you have a client call with me. And I don't really do Zooms because I have my head like this. And you don't really want to see the top of my head the whole time, but I do phone calls, an old-fashioned phone call, usually up to 30 minutes. It doesn't always take that long, depending on how complicated your business is. But I'll just ask you a bunch of questions and then work out what is it you actually need and then go from there. So that's client calls. A new thing that I'm really excited about is I'm creating a quiz on my website where you just fill in questions like, the questions that I normally ask on the phone call, and then it kind of goes down, 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 and then it gives you which contracts you need. Now, I am not in any way just selling standard contracts. At that point, you would then add to basket and it'd give you a delivery date of 3 weeks' time, when I would then call you and write your contracts for you. So it'd still be me doing the work. It's just a nice way of you being able to have that call with me and figure out what you need at 1 a.m. in the morning if you want to. So that's just another new thing I'm working on. And Pyle, if we have time, I think we probably are still good for time. It might be nice if somebody would like to just run through like a live example of how we work out what contracts you need. So if anyone wants to volunteer, I could just ask some questions and we could do a little bit of what your call is like.
So I've just stopped sharing, and bear in mind, so whatever is said at the present, it is recorded. So just so you know, because this will go out to the whole group across all the members across all areas. So Sarah, I believe you've unmuted.
Yeah, sure. So I am a brand consultant, and I work with clients in lots of different ways. Sometimes it's one-to-one Zoom calls like this, where I'm just offering advice and guidance. And then other times I work on long-term contract work where I'm implementing marketing strategies and physically doing the work myself. So would you say that we would need multiple, like, different types of model agreements, or is there one agreement that can kind of fall across all different client types?
Really good question. So you work with businesses, but not with the general public. Is it always business to business?
Just business, yeah.
Yeah. So that's one of the main things that I always try and find out first is, are people working with businesses to business, or also sometimes working with just members of the public? Because if you had both, then they would definitely be different contracts. But because yours are all business to business, now we kind of just look at that side of things, which is for you, the different services you're providing, how different are they? Now, in a half an hour call, I would go through your services with you, and I'd start to say, oh, right, okay, this aspect is a bit different, but actually we can still incorporate it within the same contract. Or no, these bits are so different that the terms you need for that to be protective and also beneficial to you would be very different to what you need for that bit. So we try to keep it to one if possible, because it's just needs so. It's just easier for you, it's better for your clients. But sometimes it's not better for your clients, because some bits won't be relevant at all, and they'll just be like, what is she doing? Like, I didn't want to have that. Or wait, is she also going to charge me for this? So it's about how complicated it becomes to be one, is when we decide, let's just do 2 or 3, or let's try and keep it as one. But my advice is always try and keep it as one where possible. And if you get it written bespoke, then you can usually do that, as long as they're not very different. Answer this question. So yeah, I'm not going to run through a whole call, but that's a little gist of what a call's like. It's not daunting. It's just a little chat like this that I've just had with Sarah, asking a few simple questions, and then I go away and can just sort of give you a quote, and that's where we kind of go from. Okay, so I hope that's a little bit helpful, Sarah. You can obviously still have a call if you want one.
Yeah, that's
not your call done. But yeah, Pyle, if we can reshare the screen and we can move on. Okay, so yeah, that's an example of a live call. Next slide, please. Right, what are your options for getting contracts in place, and what does it cost? Now, these are the 5 options for you to get a contract sorted out. Now, the first one is the least good, in my opinion, and the 5th one is the best one. And I'll kind of quickly go through those. So no contracts. There's no legal requirement for you to have a contract other than an employment contract. So if you have an employee, yes, you do need legally to have a contract. But if you are just a one-person business and you work with clients and customers, there's no legal requirement for you to have a contract for most things, other than if you're selling online. But generally, say if, like me, providing these legal services to Sarah, for example, I don't need to have a contract, and she doesn't need to really have a contract to sell her brands, her brand marketing and things. So that's one option. Don't have a contract. But you're in a better position if you copy a competitor, because if you copy a competitor and write some T's and C's up, there'll be maybe 1 or 2 things in there that are the same as what you do and can be used to protect you in some way if something were to go wrong and somebody tried to sue you. But a better way would be to buy a standard template online, which again is better than copying a competitor, but still I would argue it's not very good, because when you buy a template online, it's written for everyone, but no one specifically. And what that means is you'll have this document that you keep on file and that you get people to sign. But if something goes wrong with a client and they go to a lawyer like me and try to sue you, when the lawyer then looks at that contract, the problem with the standard is you won't usually find clauses that protect that thing, because you run your business in a very specific way, and your contract should be mirroring your business the way you run it. So the way I run my business should be fully mirrored in my contract, and a standard contract can never do that, because it's generically written to just cover a big generic thing, and I just think it's a waste of money. But that's the third thing you could do. Or you could go to a non-specialist law firm. So there's a lot of law firms out there that do lots of different areas of law. A good thing is these days it's changed a lot more. People are specializing, because the benefits of specializing are they're up to date with the legislation changes in contract law. They are up to date with just everything to do with like what the cases are when that have gone to court and when things have gone wrong and what has been found, because with contract law, there's legislation, but there's also what's happening in court, and judges are deciding things on a day-to-day basis that changes what you do in a contract. Because they might change something today, which means a certain clause is now seen as positive or negative. So I'm always up to date, and so would any other, you know, contract lawyer be up to date. And that's why the best option is to get bespoke contracts written by a specialist law firm, because then they will mirror the way you run your business and the way you operate. Because two businesses, you know, on paper might look similar, but actually when you get into that phone call and go through those things, everyone runs their business differently. So I make no assumptions. I'll ask you all the questions. You might even think some of them are, well, surely this is how you do it. But you're surprising how many different businesses run their business differently to someone who seems to be their competitor. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, common mistakes small business owners make with contracts. Failure to read the contract thoroughly. Now, sometimes you're on the other end of a contract. So you're signing a contract rather than sending a contract. Now, you might review the contract, but you might have misread something or misunderstood something, because unfortunately, contracts aren't always written in the easiest of language. But a lot of people that's their main complaint about contracts is, oh, it's written in funny language or old language or Latin or something sometimes. But my main concern with contracts is not those, because at least then you know, and you look at it and say, oh, this is a bit icky looking and it's a bit old fashioned. Maybe I should get it checked. But the ones I find even more worrying are what I call Apple-friendly contracts, in that they're written in a really friendly language, with like, you know, cute words in there, which just kind of throw you off their scent, and you're just like, oh, this is nice and friendly, let me just sign it, I'm sure it's fine. But they're the ones to watch out for, because they are usually written very one-sided, without any care in the world for what you would want in there to protect you or to benefit you. So be careful of those, because it's not always what's in the contract, it's what's not in the contract. Failure to negotiate favourable terms. So that's what I mean is sometimes if you're not getting a contract reviewed by a lawyer, you're missing the opportunity to put things in there that would actually be additional helpful or bonus bits for you, things you wouldn't have thought of yourself that I would just negotiate for all my clients. So especially if you're moving out of business and getting a new job, or you've got a spouse or someone you know that's doing that, I love negotiating employment contracts. I like getting people a few extra bits. But just generally, if you're negotiating a business deal, it's the same thing. Like, you might not know what you can ask for, and that's what it's a good job to get a lawyer to help with. Failure to seek legal advice can result in loads of issues of you being tied into a contract in particular. That's the one I get the most. So I get a lot of calls from people saying, right, I signed something, I should have got it reviewed a couple of years ago, I'm stuck. They're saying I can't get out of the contract and I have to pay for another year, X amount of money. I get a lot of those. And so if you get legal advice before signing, you can avoid all of that. And, you know, because I would find the bits in there that say that you're going to be tied in, I wouldn't make that decision for you. I'd say, oh, look, it says you're going to be tied in. Are you comfortable with that? Or should we try and include something that means there's a break clause, or there's lots of different ways of doing it. So it depends on the context, but you get the legal advice and then you know where you stand with that relationship in that business context. Consequence of these mistakes are things such as losing money and legal disputes. You don't want to be tied up in legal disputes. It takes away from you when you running your business, and it actually can impact on just every aspect of your life and just your peace of mind. So yeah, that's why you should get legal advice. Next slide, please. Importance of seeking legal advice, benefits and detriments. So compliance with, I've talked about some of these already, so I'm going to go through these a little bit quicker. Complies with legislative requirements. So there are some things that you do need to cover in your contracts, like data protection, and other things that are specific to your industry that might be needed to be included in the contract as well. When it comes to working with members of the public, there's a lot of things that are like consumer protection legislation led that I would include in the contract, which you might not have. And so they're really important to include in there as well. Minimize risk of being sued. So if you get your contracts written up properly, or if you get them reviewed, then you're less likely to have someone sue you. So you won't even know when someone takes a matter to a lawyer to go check if they can sue you. But if you've got good contract that you've had them sign, that lawyer will look at it and say, well, actually, that's what the contract says. So not really got a leg to stand on. So it minimizes the risk of being sued. It minimizes exposure if you are sued. So if you are sued and your contract properly mirrors the way you run your business, and you were to go all the way to court, like you didn't settle, nothing, you know, nothing got resolved, you go to court, that if that contract mirrors the way you run your business, you're more likely to win. So sometimes you can't stop someone from suing you. You know, people can go ahead and sue anyone if they want to. It's about what happens in the end. And so you're more likely to win if you do get sued. Protects your finances. Obviously, legal issues can be financial ruin for some people and their businesses. It gives you that protection from reputational damage. You don't want to be known as a person who's always got legal disputes or issues with their customers, even just day-to-day customer issues and niggles. And client customer relations, that's what that's about, you know, customer care. And once everything's in a contract, then that's quite clear for your customers as well about what to expect from you, and then you know what to deliver and what they're getting, and the relationship's nice and clear. All of that back to like rights and obligations again. And professionalism, it just looks really proper to have a contract in place. You know, they don't have to be a 50-page long document. There's lots of ways of doing it where they don't even have to sign it anymore. So if you were to have a consultation, I talk to you about your options for how you can get your clients to agree to a contract without them having to sign it, but obviously not in a dodgy way where they don't know about it, but obviously in a way where it's by conduct in some way. So don't think that contracts are going to add a big clunky layer to your processes. They don't have to. If you do like to have someone to sign something, then of course we can do it that way. And in some businesses, people do prefer that. So I had a client who ran a exercise coaching business. So she was like a personal trainer, and she writes coaching, like training programs for people. And I was all excited about telling her that, oh, you don't need to get the contract signed every time by a client. So she said, no, I want them to. I said, oh, right, okay. And it was really interesting. The reason for her was, if you get them to sign it, that's them making a commitment, physically making a commitment to themselves that they're going to be doing this exercise training program and working with you into that. So that was really interesting. I shouldn't make assumptions even about that, because my original assumption was the less steps taken, the better, right? But no, not always. So yeah, that's what these calls are about, figuring out what is it you actually want and why. So there's that. Yeah, so in that professionalism, next slide, please, Pyle. And next steps and top tips. So stop kidding yourself. What I mean by that is I mean that with a smile and a pinch of salt. All it means is if you have customers and clients, you do need something in place. And like I said, it's best to get one written up properly. And if it's a model agreement and you can just go ahead and use it time and time again, then it's actually not that expensive in the long run. And it actually prevents issues and, you know, can actually protect you from financial issues later on as well. Get a free consultation booked in. I offer these free consultations. I'm pretty sure other places might too. Get help working out what you need to protect your business. So that's what those calls are about. Get your T's and C's and contracts then written up, get them done, and so you can use them. Always use contracts in your business to protect them. Once they're written, please use them. Like, I'm not going to name names, but I've actually had people that I've written contracts for who sometimes just gone ahead and started something and said, we'll sign the contract later, or you can get that back to me, I'll just get, and then something's gone wrong in that meantime. And in that gap, you're just not covered. So it's really difficult for me to then say, right, okay, these are the things you can do, but they're nowhere near to what you can do when you've got your contract signed. And I can very clearly say, clause 4.5 says you must pay me by this date or whatever it is. And then it's so much easier to enforce your, whatever it is you're trying to enforce. Okay. Set a date for reviews. So yeah, reviews are very important. Just once a year is actually fine, unless you've made a big change in the way that you deliver your services, or to your services, or to your goods, or the way that you deliver them. Any big business change, yes, get it reviewed and just amended again, or rewritten, depending on how big a change it is. But otherwise, just come back to your lawyer annually and say, is there anything that needs changing? Sometimes there isn't, because there's been no legislative change, there's been no major changes. And sometimes I'll say, oh yes, we said this in your contract, but that's just changed. Let me just update that for you. And that can be usually quite a minimal cost, nothing like what it would be to just write the contract in the first place. But always do that, keep it up to date. All of this saves you time, money, stress, and hassle, very much so. I don't put horror stories out there. It's just not the kind of approach I have. I don't like doing scaremongering. But if I did, yeah, there's a lot of stories about people that haven't got their contract sorted, and then what impact that's had on their lives and their businesses. So yeah, just get them sorted. It'll just save you from all of that. Next slide, please. Special offer. So I've put in a special offer for you guys for LoveBiz. Before I go into special offer, I just also want to say that with LoveBiz, it's the only group, and it's other than friends and family, that I offer a payment plan to. So I know that a contract, or even contracts, if you need multiple contracts, can be like an upfront kind of cost. So one thing to say is I do offer payment plans. So to LoveBiz members, friends and family, just ask if I forget to offer it. So I don't offer it to everyone, so I might actually not think to offer it to you. So if you just ask, and I let you spread it across 3 months, so that usually helps with cash flow. The other thing to say is that business contracts are an expense. If you are a registered business and you pay corporation tax, if you get a contract written up, that's just can be deducted from your corporation tax. So it's a proper business expense. So it's kind of beneficial in that way as well. But the special offer today is I have never offered 20% off my contract. So I'm going to be offering the first person who wants their contract sorted out 20% off. The next 2 people, 15% off, and then the next 3 people, 10% off. So it's just a special offer for anyone watching this now or on the replay. Okay, next slide, please. Any questions?
Wow, thank you, Fahimah. You know, I know you are one of my capital members, but every time I hear you speak about what you do, you actually learn something new, and it is a bit of a good kick up the bum just to really revisit the T's and C's and everything that you do within your work. So let's hand it over to our attendees today. Has anybody got any questions? I know there was a couple in the chat. So if we'd like to do those first, and then we can move on within the space as well. So Nicola, NDA, is that a non-disclosure agreement? Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, so NDA does stand for non-disclosure agreement. Sometimes it's called a CDA, confidential disclosure agreement, or sometimes it's just called a confidentiality. They're all the same thing. So if you've got one, we've got the same. It's just the same thing. And what they are is to stop people from sharing your secrets. Or secrets is a funny word, but it just means stop people from sharing anything you share with them. So I talk to Pyle, we sign an NDA before we have a chat. Always before, please, not after, because then it's just, again, it's not, you can't rely on it. Get her to sign it before. I'm going to share, all of my new services with Pyle, tell her all about them, get her views on them and stuff. I don't want Pyle to go ahead and then just start to do it on her own. So that's why you can want an NDA or CDA or confidentiality agreement. It's the same thing.
Perfect. Thank you. And again, Nicola, what is intellectual property?
What was the question, sorry?
What is intellectual property?
Oh, really good question. So intellectual property is anything. So there's different types. There's arising intellectual property and there's background intellectual property. So sometimes arising is also called foreground. So you might have heard some of these words: foreground intellectual property, arising intellectual property, background intellectual property. Background intellectual property is when there's already something, some knowledge or information or something that already exists. So it already exists, and then you bring it into your services. But arising is when you're working with a client and something new comes up. So you're working for a client, let's say on branding, and you're now designing a new logo, you're creating, you might create other things to go with the logo in part of that branding, you might create like some kind of strap line or something. All the things that are being created in that relationship are new intellectual property, arising intellectual property. Now in your contract, you need to decide who owns that. Are you going to assign that to your client? Even though you're creating it, you're going to hand it over to your client. So with branding, you would, of course, because your client wants to own the branding. They're paying for you to be able to create that so they can then use it. But in other areas, you might not be assigning all of your intellectual property. You might be creating it, but giving a license to them to use it. You remain the owner. And in other instances, you keep a license to use it and you give it to them as an owner. So these are all the things that a contracts lawyer can help you with to decide in your business to do with whatever intellectual property that comes up in your work. Hope that answers it. I'm not sure if it does.
Yeah. Nicola, sorry, did that answer it for you? Would you like to ask anything else? Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Coral, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Hi. Yeah, I think what I meant to ask really was, is the NDA has to be separate from the T's and C's?
No.
So can it be incorporated into your T's and C's?
Yeah, absolutely. So it depends what you're using your T's and C's for. So if you're using with clients and customers, we can include confidentiality within there. It'll just be one of the clauses, and we can make it however you need it to be. But if you're then going to go and have a conversation with another business owner, you're not going to get them to sign a client contract, which is why you should have a separate NDA as well for using in business relationships with other business owners. If you're doing collaborations or anything like that, or chatting to people about your business and to get their ideas. If you're talking to, even if you're talking to a coach or a mentor, you might want them to sign an NDA if it's a business context, or if you're just planning on working with each other on something. So, but yeah, generally in your client T's and C's, you can have a clause all about confidentiality.
Right.
So you don't need a separate document for that. Yeah.
All right,
Lovely.
brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Coral. Ros, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say about the NDAs. I mean, they actually work both ways. It's not just to protect yourself, but, also from the client's point of view, because by the nature of what I do, both as a VA and as a bookkeeper, I'm getting a lot of confidential information about my clients' businesses. It reassures them that anything that I know isn't going to go any further than me.
Definitely. Now, NDAs can be both ways, or they can be one way. Now, it really depends on what you need. Both ways is very good because it's reciprocal, it seems fair. So when you put it in front of your client or anyone, they think it's fair because they're like, oh, well, whatever I share will be kept secret and whatever you share will be kept secret. But in certain contexts, you don't do that. You have it as one way. But when you have it as both ways, you're right, there's more protections. But even then, it doesn't have to be completely reciprocal. So sometimes there might be certain things that I might share that should be kept confidential, but other aspects of what I share don't need to. But with my client, everything they share needs to be kept confidential. So that's why these are written for you and your business. And then once they're written, you can go ahead and use them in a similar context every time. But yeah, you're right. They can be both ways. It can just be one way as well.
Thank you, Ros. A great question. Anybody else got any other questions? Are there any actions, takeaways that you think you'd be doing from today's workshop? Oh, there's a few nods there.
I think I've already got a call with Fahimah anyway.
Yeah, nice to see you, Coral.
Nice to see you.
I'll be having a quick check over everything and making sure that it is all up to date and meets the purpose.
Yeah, so that's the other thing I didn't mention. So it's not always about writing a new contract. If you've already got one, the other thing I do is I'm happy to have a look at it and see whether it's good enough. And if it's not, I'm even happy to just amend the one you already have rather than writing a new one if it's a good starting point. But sometimes I look at it and say, it's so poor, you're better off me writing a new one than me trying to fix it because it's going to take more time. So it's always just have the call, send me what you've already got. I'll have a look and say, do you know what? It's really good. And sometimes it is, it's fine because it's been written recently. It's been done by a good professional who's a contracts lawyer. But sometimes there's one or two things missing. Sometimes it's just terrible. So just get it checked. That's for free. I don't charge for that. But I can always advise and then it's up to you. So that's another thing that I didn't mention.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to stop recording. Fahimah, thank you so much for today. And there's been lots of smiley faces and lots of questions, which has been fantastic. So thank you. I'm going to stop.